Masail regarding mules and donkeys, and yeah, we revised the Zakatul Khayl.
And
we also discussed like the Bintu Makhad and Bintu Laboon in case you have to give zakat on Bintu Makhad, but you have Bintu Laboon, then what would be the values? For example, 2,000, you have to give back 1,000.
Right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We've been taking Kitab al-Zakah, specifically Zakah on animals, and we spoke about Zakah on horses. We mentioned that Imam Abu Hanifa is the only one who has an opinion to say that Zakah on horses is compulsory if the year has passed and they graze naturally, where the owner is not feeding them. And that's for half the year or more. So he mentions the Zakah, and we mentioned his opinions. Inshallah, today we want to take a few masail. The first is, what happens if, so we've spoken about animals in terms of camels, sheep, cows, and in opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa, horses. What happens if a person has to pay camels, but he's got those which are small and those which are big, i.e. those which are young and those which are old? So let's say, for example, a person has 5 camels, and these camels are old, no problem. He will give 1 sheep. But let's say he has 7 camels. Let's say he has 5 camels, 5 female camels, and they all give birth to 5 small camels. Okay? So these small camels must be a week, 2 weeks old. Then all of a sudden, all the mothers die of a disease. So you've only got 5 small camels left. Does a person pay zakah or they don't? Does a person pay zakah or they don't? Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Muhammad, their opinion, so you can divide this into 2. Their opinion is if it's only small camels or small cows or small sheep, a person doesn't pay zakah. So for example, if a person has 5 small camels or 40 small sheep, lambs that is, or they have calves, calf is a small cow, if they have 30, here, according to Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Muhammad, they're not going to pay any zakah. Why? Because they're small. The only time a person pays zakah, according to them, is if the small ones and the big ones are mixed together. So let's say, for example, you've got 5 camels. Out of those 5, 4 are old and 1 is a baby. Here you pay zakah, according to them. It's the only time you pay zakah. Imam Abu Yusuf has a slightly different opinion. His opinion is that even if you have small camels only or small animals only, you pay zakah and you take from amongst them. You take from amongst them if taking from amongst them is compulsory. So let's say, for example, a person has 25 small camels, baby camels. According to the first opinion, Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Muhammad, he's not going to pay any zakah because they're all small. However, according to Imam Abu Yusuf, he says no, from the small camels, the 25, when you have 25 camels, what do you have to pay, Alam Ghair?
If we have to pay 4 shah.
25.
Yeah.
25. How many do you pay, Ibrahim?
Bint Makhad.
Bint Makhad. طيب. If you pay Bint Makhad, he's saying he's got no Bint Makhad and he's only got small camels. So Imam Abu Yusuf says you take 1 of them. And obviously he doesn't start 25, he starts at 30. So he says you take 1 of them. Same when it comes to cows. If you've got 30 small calves and all the other shurut of zakah are fulfilled and they're all small, he's saying you take 1 from amongst them. And he also says that if it's the same, if you've got only animals which are sick or only animals which are injured, then you take from amongst them. So that's the first mas'ala I want to touch on. And obviously, the more you read into these mas'ala, you'll find difference of opinion, and then they'll say, okay, if this happens, then what do we do here and there, etc. But all I want you to know is, when it comes to paying zakah on small, if you've got the young, if you've got the babies of the animals as well as the older ones, as long as they're together, they agree that you count them in the threshold. However, you won't take zakah from them. However, if you've only got small ones, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Muhammad says there is no zakah. Imam Abu Yusuf says there is zakah as long as you've reached the threshold. So that's one of the masail. Second mas'ala, and this is according to the Hanafi madhab, and somebody asked yesterday, we said we'll take it today. It's called daf'ul qima. So what's daf'ul qima? Daf' is to pay, and qima is the value. Okay. So in the Hanafi madhab, they are quite lenient in terms of paying the value of what's owed in zakah. Yesterday we gave the example. We said, let's say a person owes a bint labun. Okay, bint labun is more expensive than bint makhad. Okay. And let's say he owes this one. He owes bint labun, but he only has bint makhad. He can pay this. So he can pay this and look at the difference in price and pay that also. So for example, if this is, as we said yesterday, $1,000, and this one is 2,000, he gives this bint makhad, he's still owing 1,000 in order to reach that. So he'll pay bint makhad plus 1,000. And the opposite is also true. If he has, if he owes bint makhad, he owes a camel which is young, but he only has older ones which are more expensive, like bint labun. Here he can give his bint labun worth 2,000, and the person collecting the zakah will give him 1,000 back. The Hanafi madhab, the scope for this paying in qimah, paying the value of the zakah owed, spans much more than that. So they say, let's say, for example, if a person works out his zakah and he owes bint makhad, according to them, even if he has the animals, if he doesn't want to pay the animals, he can just work out what's owed. So they'll work out, for example, from his camels, they'll say, okay, you owe us 1 bint makhad, and looking at yours, or looking at the bint makhad, we find that the price is so much, he can pay that only without giving the animal. This is the Hanafi madhab. This is the Hanafi madhab. Okay, so they say you can pay qimah when it comes to the animals also. They also go as far as saying when it comes to your sadaqatul fitr, as we mentioned yesterday. So as we know, sadaqatul fitr, zakatul fitr, the same thing. At the end of Ramadan, when people are paying their what some people say fitrah or sadaqatul fitr, the other madhahib say you must pay the grain. And the Hanafi madhab, they say you look at what's more beneficial for the poor person, and they go as far as allowing you to pay its value. So let's say you're owing, for example, dates, and those dates are worth $5. So they allow you to give those $5 for your sadaqatul fitr. So that's a mas'ala. Another mas'ala when it comes to kaffara. So let's say a person has to give a kaffara, except for when it's freeing a slave. Okay. The other kafarat, or where there's a choice, for example, kafaratul yamin, a person makes a promise and then he doesn't fulfill it. So they say if he doesn't want to feed, or he doesn't want to clothe the poor, etc., he can look at the value of this and pay his kafara. And this is the Hanafi madhab. They allow a lot more when it comes to qimah. So even when it comes to your crops as you take, when it comes to your animals as we've taken, they allow you to pay the value of this stock. They call it daf'ul qimah. And any Hanafi book you open, you'll generally find it's mentioned that وَيَجُوزُ دَفْعُ الْقِيمَةِ عِنْدَنَا. You're allowed to pay the value of what you owe. The other madhahib, they say no. the zakah is compulsory on the actual animal, so you must pay the animal. So you must pay the animal. They say no, you're allowed to pay its value. The third mas'ala that we'll take today is what happens if a person gets more animals during the year. So let's say, for example, at the beginning of the year, this is the first month of the year, let's say he has five camels, okay? What does he owe here? 1 sheep if 1 year passes. But then at the end of the year, 1 week before zakah is due, let's say this is the end of the year, okay? That's the end of the year. 1 week or 2 weeks before, let's say 2 weeks before his zakah is due, he gets another 115 camels. According to the Hanafi madhab, it's as long as it's in the same type of wealth. So here we're speaking about camels. And he has them at the end of the year, he's going to pay zakah on 120 camels. He's going to pay zakah on 120 camels. And this mas'ala they refer to, they always say, man istafada malan, whoever benefits, whoever gets more wealth during the year, and he pays zakah on it. So when they speak about animals, especially, that's what they're talking about. And this is in the Hanafi madhab. The last mas'ala I want to touch on is they speak about halaku zakah. What happens if the animals are destroyed? So let's say, for example, this is the beginning of the year. Let's put in, this is the beginning of the year, this is the end of the year. And a person has, here they have 120 camels. And at the end of the year, they also have 120 camels. How much zakah do they have to pay? Alam Gheer. 120 camels, what do you pay?
I think 2 hikka.
Hiqqatan, ahsant. طيب. Hiqqatan he owes here, okay? This year. Now, we've agreed that 1 year has passed. So this is the first month of the year. This is the 12th month of the year. He's owing hiqqatan. And he hasn't paid this zakah. So let's say he hasn't paid, he's already owing it. And 1 year, the next year has started. So he's owing these hiqqatan to the Baytul Mal. He hasn't paid them and the next year has started. Then let's say during this first month, they have a natural disaster and all his animals die. So now these hiqqatan that he had taken out, he wants to pay zakah, they are no longer living. Does he owe these 2 animals to the Baytul Mal? Does it remain in his dhimma? Does it remain a debt against him that he's got to pay? Or does this zakah fall away to say the fact that he doesn't have them, he doesn't pay it anymore? And this mas'ala goes back, you'll find the heading of it is Hal is zakatu, we say, is zakah connected to a person's dhimma, where dhimma is literally if you've taken something and then you have to owe it. So whether you have it with you or not, you have to owe it. Like you take on a loan of $1 million, you take on a loan of $1 million, you squandered it, you lost it, whatever, you've got to pay it back. Is it like that? Or are we saying zakah is compulsory on this specific item or this specific animal? And the minute it was destroyed, there's nothing to pay zakah on, so you no longer have to pay zakah. The Hanafi madhab, they lean towards the latter, what I just mentioned. So they say, if this person owes hiqqatan, for example, in this example, and he didn't pay, and after that, they got destroyed, all his wealth gets destroyed, he doesn't have to pay zakah on it. And they differentiate only when they're speaking about natural disasters. Now, let's say a person took these 2 animals and he is the one who killed them out of carelessness, or he didn't look after them, then he's still liable. So when is he not liable? If it's a natural disaster, something happens that's out of his control. And this is one of the Masail al-Hanafi madhab, they differ with the others. They say zakah is compulsory in that specific item. So the minute it's not there, it's destroyed, the person doesn't have to pay it. So much so in some of the books, they go as far as saying, even if the sa'i, the person who came to collect zakah, even if he came to collect it and the guy refused, and then it got destroyed, they say he doesn't have to pay. So to quickly recap these masail that we took, the first mas'ala we took is if there's small and big, okay? If you've got small animals or babies and big animals, according to Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Muhammad, there's no zakah if you've only got small animals. According to Imam Abu Yusuf, he says you must take from the small animals. As for if there's a mix between the two, then you count them, but you don't take from them. Next mas'ala we took was daf'ul qimah, which is paying the equivalent in cash amount, for example, gold, silver, paper money. The Hanafi madhab allow it, and their scope is much broader than the others. So they allow you to pay it when it comes to your sadaqatul fitr as well as your kafarat. Third mas'ala we took is if a person attains more wealth of the same item, the same type of wealth during the year, then he just adds it to when he had reached nisab. So let's say in this example, a person had 5 camels and then they had 115 just 2 weeks before zakah. They're going to pay his zakah on 120 camels, even though they've only held these for 2 weeks. Why? When he reached nisab, it became compulsory upon him and we're just adding to it. However, let's say he has 120 camels and he's had no cows before, okay? He never ever have cows. Then all of a sudden, 1 month before, he gets some cows. Yeah, let's say he gets a cow, he gets 30 cows here. Here, he doesn't have to pay zakah at the end of this year because this is 2 different types of wealth. You're talking about camels and you're talking about cows. They say this is one jins, this is one category, and the other is another category. So this nisab, if he's reached here, will start from here and he'll count a year going forward. Why? Because the wealth is different. Fourth mas'ala we took is if a person's zakah is delayed and then the zakah, the animals had to be destroyed or what he has to pay zakah on is destroyed, his crops, etc. Hanafi madhab says he doesn't have to pay unless he himself was the cause of this destruction, i.e. he was careless or didn't look after them. With that, we've taken, I would say, in the smaller Hanafi fiqh books, you've taken 100% of the masail in Bahimat al-An'am. And the bigger books, a little bit bigger, like Hidayah and others, they have a few, 3-4 masail, which a lot of them are not relevant. And a lot of them go into a lot of difference of opinion in the madhab. And then you find they say, okay, but then this riwayah says this riwayah says that. I wouldn't say they're not important at all, no, but they're not as important as what you've taken. So far you've taken Bahimat al-An'am, you've taken the asl, you've taken the principles, you've taken the rules, you've taken a few exceptions to the masail, and inshallah with that, if you revise, you've got zakat Bahimat al-An'am. With that, we come to an end. When it comes to Bahimat al-An'am, then inshallah we'll start off with Zuru' wal-Thimar, which is literally on your foodstuffs, zakah on foodstuffs. It's also quite simple. After that, we'll move on to gold and silver and new paper money, inshallah. Any questions?
Assalamu alaikum.
Ibrahim.
I have a question. So from, let's say you plant wheat specifically for your animals to eat. So would that be considered them eating from the lands of Allah?
It depends. Are you looking after the wheat or not? So in some places, if you plant whatever, just the other day I was sitting with somebody in the car, they were saying, we have such good land, if you have to eat something and throw it, it's going to grow. So there's a difference between that, and there's a difference between a person who plants, who has to look after and water. Here we're mainly looking at the watering of it. That's why they say as-sa'imah are those animals that eat off the land, and you're looking at the land having, by the permission of Allah, having provided that food. So the minute you are going to look after this wheat, for example, you're going to plant it, you're going to water it, it's as though you're providing for the animal. Why? If you look at it in a broader context, it's because you are having some sort of monetary loss by providing for these animals. Hence, we don't want to tax you on them. Whereas a person who is not paying for the upkeep and the food of his animals, he would have to pay because he's growing for free. Do you understand?
Yes, Jazakallah khair.
I have a question.
Yes.
Sheikh, why do the person has to pay if the financial year has not yet passed yet? Because one of the condition is that the holding, the wealth should be like, what do you call it, the holding for 1 year. So when the number of camels increased from 15 to 115 for just a week, the holding is not for 1 year. So why should
because we count his nisab as having started at the beginning of the year. Now, let me give you let's say this is the beginning of the year, and let's say this is the end of the year, and let's say somebody is dealing in camels. Okay, let's say they've got 1,000 camels and they're all reproducing. Okay, so let's say at the beginning he's got 1,000, and every day or every 2 days his camels are increasing and decreasing. He's selling a few and a few are giving birth. So it's not possible for him. Let's say on the second day they've gone up to 1,100, and then on the third day they've gone up to 1,200. This is only 3 days in the month. Are you going to tell him every day now for these 100 count a new nisab? So for these 100 you must, if this was for example on the 1st of Muharram you're paying 1,000, then on the 2nd of Muharram you must pay for these 100, then on the 3rd of Muharram you must pay for these other extras. And it's not possible. It's not possible. So in order to make it easy, what they said is, look, here's the beginning of the year. The minute you've reached nisab, so a person who's on 4 camels hasn't reached nisab. Say the minute you've reached nisab, 5 for example, and then at the end of the year, whatever you've got at the end of the year, you pay zakah on it. So here you benefited maybe 3, and then here you benefited another 4, and here you benefited another 3. So you got 5 and 3 is 8, 8 and 4 is 12, 12 and 3 is 15. So here they'll say, right, at the end of the year, pay zakah on 15, even though this 3 you might have only held it for 1 week, because it's practically impossible to work out your zakah on, especially on these large scales. You'll be having to something compulsory to pay every few days, every week, every month. And then the opposite is also true. Like I told you, mas'ala, we mentioned it at the beginning and we'll mention it again because they generally mention it in this bab. We said if a person wants to pay zakah in advance, then it's permissible for him to pay zakah in advance. And this, an example is now with the earthquake, for example, in Turkey. May Allah make it easy for them all, and may He have mercy on those who've passed away. May He cure those who are ill, and make it easy for everybody. I mean, let's say, for example, you've got businessmen now whose zakah is only going to be due after another 9 months, and here you've got an emergency. So you find a lot of people, what they'll say, okay, you've got wealth, yeah, whatever you can give in sadaqah, give. They'll say, but this is a catastrophe and we're taking zakah because we're going to give those in need. We're going to give people who've lost everything, fuqara wal masakin. طيب. So they'll say, bring your zakah forward. They'll tell these people, bring your zakah forward. So this guy, in the 9th month, or after 9 months, he's owing in zakah 1 million. Okay. They'll tell him, okay, don't pay there in after 9 months, bring it forward here and count it. And then he'll see out the rest of the months and see if there's any fluctuations. You understand? And what they could say also is, let's say somebody paid their zakah. So let's say it's Ramadan now. Usually people pay zakah in Ramadan. Say it's Ramadan now. and everybody's paid their zakah. And then 1 month later, you've had this big natural disaster. So you can call on these people who've given their zakah to say, right, give your zakah for the next year, and they'll count it, and give your zakah for the following year, and they'll count it. So that's a mas'ala of bringing your zakah forward. And then obviously you calculate it to see if you owe anything extra or you paid a little bit extra, etc. Omar, if you have a lot of noise, we might not hear your question, but try.
I have a question that we took Imam Abu Yusuf's Masla, in which he said from 25 small camel.
You need type your masala, type your question. There's a lot of noise on your side. Type it, then we'll get it, inshallah. Any other question?
I have a question about clarification. So when you give zakat for animal, not all of them need to be milk bearing, but your intention needs to be that there's going to be a few of them that is going to give me milk.
Yes, because if you've got the males and the females, how do the females reproduce? You need to have males.
I meant like only because what I thought was only the females were taken into account. So it's like you have like 500 males, 500 females. So they only do zakat on 500 females rather than 500.
No. When you're paying your zakah, you give out the females. But when you have animals, you count the males and the females. Okay, what happens if a person only has males? They have 40 bulls, 40 male cows. What do they pay? They'll say, look at what the guy's got and let him take one from there. They'll say, give a musin. But generally, the higher you get with the cows, it's very rare for somebody to only have one gender. Imam Abu Yusuf Masala on a threshold 25 had to pay, or on 5 to 9. That's in which Masala he's speaking about the little ones. He says, you see, that's why I never want to go into too much detail. There's some say that he starts off at 30 and for in certain thresholds. So he doesn't start at was zakatable. Inshallah, I'll get you that detail because it's mentioned quite a lot of detail, and I'll send it to you, bi'idhnillah. I'll send that to you. But for now, just take that his general rule is that if you've got small ones only, you can take from the small ones as long as you've reached the threshold. Any other questions? Nothing else? Well, what's the second topic we need to take? Today's Wednesday, Mustalah al-Hadith. What have we taken so far? Alam Ghira, define for me Hadith Sahih.
Check the Sahih Hadith is the one which has authentic chain. It shouldn't be shaz, or there shouldn't be any illa. Yeah. So, and there shouldn't be any illa. And the last thing is that there should be adl and dabt, which means
the person narrating the hadith.
Yeah. Sorry?
It should be upright Muslims with good hifth. طيب, what's the difference, Ibrahim, between hadith sahih and hadith hasan? One difference. Ibn Hajar mentioned one difference.
In the memory.
In the memory. So he says that the first ones, the dabt was very good, and these ones are khafif al-dabt. Khafif is a little bit lighter. Okay, that's the main difference. So far what we've taken sahih and we've taken hasan. Okay. And then you find that Al-Bayquni says وَكُلُّ مَا عَنْ رُتْبَةِ الْحُسْنِ قَصُرْ فَهُوَ الضَّعِيفُ وَهُوَ أَقْسَامًا كُثُرْ. He said anything that's below hasan in any way goes under da'if. So we put da'if. And he says this is, the da'if is many different categories. So for example, here we said ittisalu sanad, okay? On both of these, we agree that the chain must be connected, okay? Ittisalu sanad. The minute your sanad is not muttasil, the minute you've got a cut in the chain, you're coming here already. It's a type of da'if. The minute you've got a hadith which has an illah, which is a major illah, ma'lul, right? You're already going to da'if, you're coming here. The minute you've got a hadith where the memory of the person, it's neither was he strong, nor was he just a little bit less than strong. He was weak when it came to memory. You're already coming here. And the minute you've got somebody who his memory may have been good, but he was a liar, considered a liar, didn't have good deen, you're already coming here. That's why it says وَكُلُّ مَا رُتْبَةِ الْحُسْنِ قَصُرْ فَهُوَ الضَّعِيفُ وَهُوَ أَقْسَامًا كُثُرْ. It says many different aqsam. Some of the scholars mention more than 100 and 200 and 300 different types of da'if, up until you get to what's called mawdu'. Mawdu' is like completely fabricated. Then, so when you look at these shurut here, Sahih and Hasan, anything that's worse than that will automatically come here to da'if. Now, I told you that at times you have a difference of opinion between the scholars. Why is it some of them might say, no, it's Hasan, and some will say it's da'if? It's according to who said this Rawi, his hifth was good or not, or whoever said he was good, upright Muslim or not. So one person may say this person was kadhab, he was a complete liar. Another person may say, no, he was actually decent. So there is two people differing. One person may say his hifth was brilliant, and the other may say, no, he was weak. Hence, they would differ when it comes to ruling on the hadith. Then he says, then now he starts telling you different types of hadith. What's the definition of these types of hadith? It says, وَمَا أُضِيفَ لِلنَّبِي الْمَرْفُوعُ. أضاف يضيف. It says, وَمَا أُضِيفَ. Whatever's been attributed to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we're not talking about it being connected. We're talking about attributed. So whether a Sahabi said قال sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So here again, let's draw a chain. You've got the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam here. You've got a Sahabi here. And you've got a Tabi'i here. He says anything attributed to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is called marfu'. So whether the Sahabi is saying qala sallallahu alaihi wasallam, okay, it is known as marfu'. Marfu'. Or if this tabi'i he's jumping the Sahabi, but he's still attributing it to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's also called marfu', even though the chain is broken. And a lot of the times when you read in the books of hadith, you read وَلَهُ حُكْمُ الرَّفْعِ, and it has the ruling of being attributed or raised to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What does that mean? At times a Sahabi may have an opinion, or he may be saying something. So this Sahabi says something about the day of Qiyamah, or something from the unseen. And we know that the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, all of them are udul, all of them were upright, good Muslims. And it's impossible for them to have taken this piece of knowledge by themselves. So where could they have gotten that piece of knowledge? They most definitely got it from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they'll say, وَلَهُ حُكْمُ الرَّفْعِ. It has the ruling of being raised to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's a lot when it comes to things of the unseen, etc. Why? Because there's no chance he's going to just be picking something from his pocket and giving it to you. No, the fact that he's mentioning something to you definitely came from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. At times, a Sahabi may have an opinion of his own, so that is different. So this type, the minute you're attributing to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is called marfu'. So this is a type of hadith. This now we're no longer talking about what's authentic, not authentic. Marfu' you could have a hadith which they say is marfu', but it's strong, authentic, and one that's hasan and one that's da'if. By example, this tabi'i jumps the Sahabi and he goes straight to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's got a cut in the chain, that's called marfu'. Then he says, even though he doesn't mention this, but whatever stops at a Sahabi. So for example, at times you have a Tabi'i, he says that قال ابن عباس هكذا. For example, Ibn Abbas رضي الله عنه said this. And his chain doesn't carry on to say, and Ibn Abbas got it from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it could be an opinion of Ibn Abbas or Ibn Mas'ud or Ibn Umar, for example. So this here is called mawquf. Mawquf is from waqf, to stop. Why? Mawquf means it stops. This attribution stops at the Sahabi. So marfu is what's attributed and going up to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Al-mawquf stops at the Sahabi. Okay, so the minute it's at times you read in a book of hadith, it give you a hadith and you say وَهُوَ مَوْقُوفٌ عَلَى ابْنِ عُمَرٍ, which means this is not actually attributed to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but it stops here at Ibn Umar. It's an opinion of his. Okay. It says وَمَا أُضِيفَ لِلنَّبِي الْمَرْفُوعُ وَمَا الْتَابِعٍ هُوَ الْمَقْطُوعُ. And whatever stops at a tabi'i is called maqtu'. Qata' is like it's cut because it's still far away, it's far down. So there's a lot of the times you hear something is maqtu', it's stopping at a tabi'i. So for example, somebody else may have come after that. Some of the scholars may have an opinion and they'll say, okay, we're stopping, it stops at Az-Zuhri, for example. It stops at Al-Hasan Al-Basri. It stops at Mujahid ibn Jabr. Mujahid ibn Jabr didn't say, for example, that Ibn Abbas told me, and no, so it's stopping at him. So he says here, he's giving you وَمَا لِتَابِعٍ هُوَ الْمَقْطُوعُ. Then he gives you another type of hadith, which is called al-musnad. What's musnad? He says وَالْمُسْنَدُ الْمُتَّصِلُ الْإِسْنَادِ مِنْ رَاوِيهِ حَتَّى الْمُصْطَفَى وَلَمْ يَبِنْ. Musnad is another type now. Okay. And all these definitions, you'll find them in books of hadith. It says وَالْمُسْنَدُ الْمُتَّصِلِ. Musnad is something that's connected. It has ittisal. That's why they say a phone call is ittisal. Why? Because you're connected to somebody. It says وَالْمُسْنَدُ. What's the definition of musnad? الْمُتَّصِلُ الْإِسْنَادِ مِنْ. The whole chain is connected. رَاوِيهِ, from the narrator, first narrator, حتى المصطفى, until the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, ولم يبن, and there's no cut in it. So for example, if we had to start here from number 1 and going to number 2 and going to number 3 and going to number 4, this will be called hadith musnad. Okay, musnad. Why? The chain is connected. Can you have a chain that's weak? Yes. Why? Because here we're only talking about the chain. We're not going to explore the people in the chain. We're saying, no, this chain is connected. Could it be authentic? Maybe. Could it be Hasan? Maybe. Could it be Da'if? Maybe. Now, if you notice, you can see that musnad, this musnad here, it shares with marfu'. So you can only get to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam if something is marfu', and you can only get to him if it's musnad. The minute something is mawquf, it can't be musnad. Why? Because it hasn't reached the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It wasn't attributed to him. And the minute something is maqtu', it doesn't get to musnad. All these are different definitions they're giving you and they're trying to teach you. And you'll get more and more, inshallah. So today we took a few. We said everything that's less, or every condition that's not met in Hasan, the minute you're going lower, even if it's 1, then you're getting into Da'if ahadith. Then afterwards we spoke about marfu', attributed to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then mawquf stops at a sahabi, attributed to a sahabi, and maqtu' attributed or stops at a tabi'i. Then we took musnad, and we said musnad is where the chain is joint all the way from the rawi until the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what happens, for example, let's say if number 1 narrates from number 3 and number 3 narrates from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they've missed number 2, they've missed the second rawi. Okay, and we know there's no chance these two meet. So here your sanad, your chain is already broken. It can't be musnad. But is it marfu'? Yes, because this guy is attributing it to this guy is saying, attributing it to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I hope you understood those subtle differences. very subtle. And the more books of hadith you read, you'll see these, especially when you're reading in Sunan, Tirmidhi, An-Nasai, Ibn Majah, Sunan Abi Dawood, because Bukhari and Muslim, rahimahumullah, they mainly chose, one of their conditions is for the hadith to be authentic and sahih. So they've already done the hard work for you and said, we're only going to put what's sahih. So you're not going to find people missing or people who are extremely weak, etc. Any questions with what we've taken?
Sheikh, the exact definition or meaning of marfu is fabricated?
No. There's a difference between marfu' and mawdu'. Mawdu' is fabricated. Wada'a, from wada'a, somebody put it. I put it like from his own pocket. And marfu' is from rafa'a, to raise. So they're attributing it, they're raising it to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Do you understand?
But will we consider it as da'if or above?
No. Here we're not talking about the first lessons we took. We were talking about authenticity.
Sahih.
What makes a hadith sahih, hasan, da'if. Here we're not marfu and mawquf and maqtu and musnad does not necessarily mean something is da'if or not. No, it's speaking about the type of hadith. Okay. So for example, somebody can describe you as being a strong man, your outer appearance, but whatever inequalities you may have, what people may know is different. Same thing here. And when you read through books of hadith with asanid, you read through books of tafsir especially, you find a lot of these definitions. Any other questions? No more question with regards to this. Main thing is you becoming aware of the different types of hadith, and when you read through the books, inshallah, you will understand.
Sheikh, Brother Umar has a question in the chat about the camel, on Imam Yusuf Masala only.
Yeah, I touched on that. I already touched on it. Where were you?
Right.
Yeah, right. Inshallah, to end of today, generally on Wednesday, we speak about something of benefit, something growth, etc., personal development. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inshallah, today I want to touch on a subtle mas'ala that not a lot of people understand, and not a lot of people pay attention to, and that is, obviously, we've been speaking about a person raising their standard, a person becoming the best in what they do, a person putting effort, a person believing in what's possible. You find that there's some people who are driven by those around them. There's some people who are driven by competing with the next person. That's a group of people, and that's a large group of people. You find those who are completely unmotivated at the bottom. Then you find those who are higher, who look at others and they say, I want to be like that. I want to be better than that. I want to compete with them. And then you find a top group of people. They're not driven by looking at others. They're driven by a greater cause or a greater goal. And this you find the difference between Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, for example, and the others. So, for example, there's the hadith where Umar radiallahu anhu says that two great companions, the best of the Muslimin, and you find Umar radiallahu anhu looking to give half his wealth in sadaqah, great deed, because he wants to compete and surpass Abu Bakr. So look at his focus. And Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he speaks about this. So Umar radiallahu anhu wants to surpass Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. As for Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, he's not looking at the competition around him. He's just driven by being the best he can be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously, all of them are working for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but look at the difference. So when the Messenger ﷺ asks Umar radiallahu anhu, says, you've come with half your wealth, or what have you left with your family? And says, half my wealth, i.e. I've given half. And he asks Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, what have you given? What have you left behind? And he says, I've left behind Allah and His Messenger, i.e. I've given everything to your Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is something subtle that a lot of people don't pay attention to. And you find it when people talk about sport and they talk about competition on a very deep level. They're talking about not worrying about what everybody else is doing. Do it for yourself, firstly. So the minute you worried, for example, let's say you're living in a community where everybody's Arabic level might be, the best person in your community might be at 50%. Or I give you another example. The best person in your community who's a hafiz may be reading one juz with one mistake in every juz, okay? So he's making 30 mistakes in the Quran. If you are only trying to compete with him, what you're going to get to? 29 mistakes, 28 mistakes, 20 mistakes maybe? But if you've left that and you just say, you know what, I want to be the best in what I'm doing. I'm not being driven by them, and I'm not looking to be better than them. I know my value and I want to be the best at what I do. And generally what helps when it comes to this is ikhlas, is true sincerity. So you find, for example, somebody wants to donate money. And let's say they're all rich people. And one guy gives $1 million, and then the next guy, it's also a good deed. Don't get me wrong, it's not a good deed. It's not that it's something frowned upon. No, with the correct intention, it's a good deed. This guy wants to give sadaqah, and he also wants to give more than the next guy. So he gives 1.1 million. And the next guy gives 1.2 million. And then you get this guy who comes out of nowhere, who's not worried about whatever everybody else is giving, and he gives 10 million. You see the subtle difference. And this is what happens when it comes to competition, when it comes to your standards, when it comes to judging and taking account of yourself. If you only look at your community, or you only look at your friends, or you only look at your circle, a lot of the times there's not much growth that you expect. Why? Because you're looking at people who've from a similar community to you, similar background, similar upbringing. What's the most you guys are going to improve? 5%, 3%, 2%? No. And if you look at those who are much better than you around the world, you might improve 30, 40%. And there's a higher level than that where you want to own the category. You want to be the best at it. And I gave you the example of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. Khalas. Everybody wanted to compete with him, and who was he competing with? No, he was just doing what he saw best, and what he saw him having done that which pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why in Surah Al-Layl, some of the scholars mention the last few verses that are praising the one who's giving in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's talking about Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. All way is mentioned at the end before سوى الليل إذا يغشى والنهار إذا تجلى ذكر الأنثى فأما من أعطى واتقى وصدق بالحسنى فسنيسره اليسرى وما من بخل واستغنى وكذب بالحسنى فسنيسره العسرى وما يغني عنه ماله إذا تردى إن علينا للهدى وإن للآخرة والأولى فأنذرتكم نارا تلظى لا يصلاها إلا الأشقى الذي كذب وتولى وسيجنبها الأتقى الذي يؤتي ماله يتزكى وما لأحد عنده من نعمة تجزى إلا ابتغاء وجه ربه الأعلى. All this that is given is just for one reason. He wants Allah to be pleased with him. إلا ابتغاء وجه ربه الأعلى. And this is something very subtle. This you find people who talk about this when it comes to a highly competitive environment. Especially when it comes to sport, they speak about these things. But you're also able to find differences when you're also able to find examples. If you look some of the stories of the Sahaba, some of the stories of the Tabi'in, some of the stories of the great scholars who came after, where you find somebody who's always looking to compete with the next guy who was good, but that guy who was brilliant, he's not looking at all those around him. He's just looking to do what he is able to do and be the best. at it. So from that, I would encourage you guys that when it comes to your standard, don't just look at those around you. Don't just look at those who may have done it 5 and 10 times better. You might find a new way of doing it. And that's where you have pioneers in the field. That's where you have innovation, not in the deen. I'm not talking about innovation in ibadah. No, innovation when it comes to new methods, for example, of teaching fiqh, new methods or new means of propagating the deen, etc. Those viewers, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us goodness and beneficial knowledge and make us from those who are always striving to be the best and to always use their potential in a way that pleases Him. Ameen. Any questions with what we've taken, the whole lesson? Inshallah, tomorrow we want to go through a little bit of revision along with a zakah on foodstuffs, and we'll take Al-Arabiya to Bayna Yaday Book 1, and maybe surah, one of the surahs, Li'ilafi Quraysh. That's where we reached.